In videos about philosophy and introspection, Minecraft might be the last game you would think to find. But despite the blocky textures and exploding green men, Minecraft also, at its core, teaches us all a very powerful lesson. A lesson about creativity, about joy, about the beauty of it all, and embracing it. You see, back when I was a kid in elementary school, Minecraft was a phenomenon, and to this day, it still is. Many of my friends after school would rush home to load up into a new world where their imaginations knew no bounds. For most, this meant building a house to survive the harsh night, and for others, it was the beginning of constructing massive places that resembled some of the great architecture of the real world. But for me, the best part about Minecraft was just the way it made me feel. Looking out into those blocky landscapes and just thinking to myself, what if? And there really is a seductive sense in that idea, that you really can make whatever you want. It's fun for the same reasons that we as kids play with action figures or dolls, or make up stories in our heads full of nothing but our imagination. Because it's a key component of what makes us human in the first place, that creative bone in all of us, that sees the mundane or uninteresting and finds so much beauty in it all. In Immanuel Kant's Critique of Judgment, one of many volumes of extensive critiques the man made on all sorts of topics, he dives into questions around aesthetics, the study of beauty and taste. And I think many of the ideas he presents actually are perfectly displayed in Minecraft. For instance, he argued that the real power of aesthetics, of beauty, was that they were one of the only things that we appreciate merely out of its own merit, not out of vying for personal gain or something practical. For the most part, people don't work on creations in Minecraft because they are trying to gain something. It's because they simply enjoy the journey, the feelings of accomplishment in creating something that is really your own, no matter how small or large. The satisfaction of crafting something you can be proud of, because there really is a sublime sort of nature in things like this, where the object of your imagination, or the goal you look to achieve when creating something, is formless, without real explanation, and yet it still has an overbearing and powerful nature that captures our souls. Kant argued that when we experience beauty, our imaginations and cognitive self come into a zone that he called free play, where pleasure is formed in a uniquely non-conceptual way that inspires a sense of purpose in the things that otherwise lack purpose. Or in other words, while it's hard to explain why, the pointless things we create in Minecraft have a funny way of taking a life of their own, of becoming something that puts a smile on our face or hits us with a wave of nostalgia. And it's strange too, because as weird as it sounds, it gets even stranger. Because things like this, full of so much unexplainable beauty, also have a knack for stirring the goodness inside us too. Like the happy feelings of morning dew hitting your face, or looking out at an expansive vista that makes your soul sing, Minecraft too can have this effect, by allowing players full creativity to do whatever they want. There are no objectives, no main quests or NPCs with endless dialogue, just you and the world beckoning you in. And it's these creative outlets like Minecraft or even Roblox that are so crucial and necessary for human flourishing. By allowing individuals to connect with the deeper aspects of their rational and imaginative faculties and opening up our hearts and minds to a purpose that otherwise is completely hidden. And while Minecraft may be the best and most simple example of this, it's also a key principle of what I think makes games as a whole so special in the first place. The fact that they give us agency in their worlds, where our imaginations can run free and wild to create things, make up stories for our characters, or take the reins of what to say in important moments. And if nothing else, no other medium gives us the ability for creative expression quite like games do. And maybe in a way, that creativity is a window into our own souls. Funny how even in the games you least expect it, so many meaningful lessons can be found. The 21st century is one that can largely be defined by an almost impenetrable sense of nihilism, where it feels like no matter where you look, there are countless people being held down by a debilitating lack of meaning, purpose, and sense of value. For them, work, play, and even life itself have lost any point. It's a sad state of affairs, only made sadder by the fact that these people may not even be wrong. After all, is there really any meaning behind all of, well, this? But you know, maybe that doesn't have to be a bad thing. Maybe this lack of meaning in the universe is actually one of the most beautiful traits of our existence, something that makes it all worth it in the end. Nihilism with an optimistic twist. And if there is one game that exemplifies this idea perfectly, it's Outer Wilds. Every day in the game you awake to a universe teetering on the edge of destruction, where you lift your head up from a roaring campfire and are given 22 minutes to discover the secrets of the universe, lest the sun in your system once again goes supernova and sends you back in time to where it all began, again around the campfire. So in order to figure out how to stop all of this, you are able to command a nearby spaceship and take off into the stars, visiting multiple planets nearby, all with something that makes them special and unique. On one, the entire surface is made of water, with giant aquatic tornadoes reaching into the sky. On another, there is a massive black hole at the center of the planet, slowly sucking in everything nearby into the abyss. And on a set of two, you can watch as sand from one is siphoned off into the other, meaning on each and every planet or body of rock in this solar system, things are changing over time. And where you are and at what time matters wherever you go. So it's up to you to decipher what buttons do what actions unlock new areas, or for example, how to deal with quantum entangled rocks that change position every time you look away. It's a fascinating premise for a game, and without exaggeration will be many people's greatest experience in the entire medium on a first playthrough. But you see, I think the real greatest achievement of this beloved indie title is what it has to say about the universe itself. Because the further and further you get into Outer Wilds, the closer you get to trying to save the universe. You unearth ancient lost space stations that belong to a previous species that could control suns, and track down ways to use black holes or quantum particles in the system to your own advantage to quickly move between locations in order to solve every puzzle you need to. And when you finally put all the pieces together and get to the true ending of Outer Wilds, it feels like such an accomplishment. You can't wait to finally save the galaxy and end the cycles that for so long have tormented you. But then something crazy happens. Despite doing everything you could, solving every single puzzle, and doing each step in the right order, the sun once again goes supernova and the universe ends. You open your eyes around the fateful campfire once again and mourn. Despite all of your efforts, everything you have done over hours and hours of learning, it was all for nothing. The forces of the universe cannot be stopped no matter what actions you take. And from a nihilist point of view, it's damning proof that the universe is indeed meaningless and our place in it is even less defined. But in that same ending where the universe once again ends, we also get to sit around a new campfire, this time with all of our friends and people we have met along the way, who embrace us in the echoes of eternity, the eye of the universe, a place where all new life is born. And as you look into the eyes of every person here and fall into the trance of their instruments as they begin to play, you realize that everything you have been through, all the struggle that ended up being for no gain, was worth it all in the end. In the early 1900s, a French philosopher named Albert Camus explored the ideas of finding meaning in the universe. He too, like the nihilists before him, found an objective truth in the meaninglessness of the universe. But Albert didn't subscribe to the pessimistic thoughts that this usually brought out in followers. Rather, he was an existentialist, someone who taught that despite the absurd and inconsequential journey of life, that didn't mean it wasn't all worth it in the end. In fact, he argued, when met with something outside our control, so impossible to domesticate, the proper response was not to lay down and give up, but instead to embrace and find meaning in the meaninglessness. And Outer Wilds is a game about this very idea. That even in a universe that fights us at every step and refuses to acknowledge our presence or actions, we must still tackle it head on and find meaning nonetheless. Because even in a place where nothing matters, there still are the people around you, or your very trust in yourself, a sense of duty and responsibility in the face of absurdity that still gives so much meaning to it all. It's possible to commit no mistakes and still lose. That's not weakness, that's life. Everything comes to an end, and that's all right. That's what makes life beautiful. And if you look at life so optimistically in this way, it has a funny way of looking back at you and smiling. Because at the end of the day, the ones around us and the purpose we make for ourselves is what matters most. Another profound lesson from yet another profound game. In my opinion, one of the most unfortunate circumstances of our modern era is an apparent lack in many to forgive. And that's because forgiveness is something that we all need at some point in our journeys. After all, no one's perfect. Even the most cruel and evil among us in the path of life must have a course to retribution and absolution, lest we crumble as a society. And what better way to prove this point than through maybe the most moving redemption story I've ever seen in a game, Arthur Morgan from Red Dead Redemption 2. You see, in the Wild West, there are no rules, which means for vagabonds like Arthur, the world is ripe for the picking. As a young boy, he was taken in by a gang leader named Dutch and forged into a ruthless killer who gets the job done, with precision and brutality. And for the entire first half of the game, you do just that, getting things done, which involves killing, torturing, and using violence no matter the cost. But then, something tragic happens. Dutch and the gang are hired as debt collectors under a rich man's rule, and Arthur is assigned to go and retrieve a large sum of money from a family who has failed to pay for many days past their due. So Arthur makes his way to this isolated farm and finds the father outside, after which he screams in his face and beats him to near unconsciousness on the ground in a pool of blood, as his wife and young son scream and plead for you to stop. The father begs for you to end the madness and explains that he has no money left. And by the time he is nothing but a broken husk laying at your feet, you learn from his wife that he has contracted tuberculosis and that he has no money to give because they are just trying to keep him alive. But Arthur, in the cold nature that has forged him, simply says they must pay soon and leaves. Without a doubt, at this point, Arthur, just like many others in the gang, is ruthless and despicable. The type of hero that, while cool, is most certainly not noble, outside of anyone within his own gang, that is. And most of all, the type of hero that seems like he is already too far gone. A human being that has committed so much atrocity and evil that no one can save them. But if we listen to the teachings of the famed German-American historian and philosopher Hannah Arendt, maybe there is hope. You see, Hannah argued in the early 20th century that despite the circumstances, redemption is always a necessary formula for humanity, as we all are fallible and make mistakes. Only by allowing people new beginnings to not only forgive them, but for them to forgive themselves in their wrongdoing, can we interrupt the cycle of vengeance and retaliation. By moving on past our hate and prejudice, can new souls be born in the place of pure evil. And in the case of Arthur Morgan, everything was about to change. Shortly after the first incident with the Downs family, Arthur learns that the father has died due to his ailment, and in his place, the mother has turned to prostitution to save her dying son. For nights on end, she is used and abused, all in an effort to make just enough money to scrape by. A truly harrowing tale. And one that moves something in Arthur's heart too, seeing what he has done to this family, this innocent and dying son and mother who will now never be the same. In Arthur's journal at this point in the story, we can see how much of an effect this is having on him, causing him to spiral into questioning what he is even doing and whether or not he can forgive himself for the sins he has committed in the face of God. And so begins a path to redemption. Slowly, mission by mission, Arthur starts to give back, whether that be by visiting the Downs family to give them money so they no longer have to suffer, or letting people go where before he would have killed them instantly. Finally understanding all the destruction he has wrought on the world, Arthur realizes that even if it's all for nothing, he has to try and right his wrongs. And as the gang turns more and more into madness under their fearless leader Dutch, Arthur is on a different path, slowly breaking further and further away from things he learned as a young boy. But just as Arthur is well on his way to forging this new path, almost in a cruel twist of fate, he contracts tuberculosis with little time left to live. So it's in these dying moments that Arthur fully understands his purpose, that while his destiny may already be solidified in hell, he will make sure that he can help as many others reach the light in the small time he has left. And in these final chapters of the story, we see the most powerful moment in the entire ensemble. where Arthur visits a nun and sits with her on a bench, where he finally exclaims just how scared he is, how sorry he is for the man he was and what he has done, fearful of what will happen when he meets his maker. This violent and stoic figure, that for most of the game has left nothing but destruction everywhere he has gone, finally opens up and reveals to the world that behind all of the evil deeds was a man in soul screaming for redemption, for a chance at becoming something more. And more than anything, the story of Arthur Morgan from Red Dead Redemption 2 is a story about all of us, about the mistakes we made or the times in life we are ashamed of the people we have become, but also about how no matter deep we dig ourselves into the depths of hell, there's always a path to redemption. Not always one where everyone will forgive or forget, but one where we can at least look at ourselves in the mirror, in our heart of hearts and our soul, and know that we have changed, living every day in service to others and looking for a better tomorrow. If you are ever ashamed of the man or woman you have become, if you are ever disgusted with the person you are in comparison to what you could have been, don't ever forget that in the echoes of life, there is always tomorrow. Always a path to your redemption. Despite the mistakes you have made in the eyes of your maker or the universe itself, how you choose to right your wrongs is what will matter the most in the end. And what a powerful message and lesson that is from such a special game. While Obsidian's more well-known Pillars of Eternity series made us ponder on the question of what happens in a world where God is dead, the lesser-known but also fantastic Tyranny game from the same studio flips this exact question on its head, and instead makes us ask, what even gives God power in the first place? After all, entire wars and crusades have been waged in our real world all in the name of figures and deities who might not even exist. And what is a better display of power than that? People giving their lives to a being or presence they have never seen. In Tyranny, you play as what is known as a Fatebinder, an agent who serves in the name of the Archon of Justice, Tunon the Adjudicator. Tunon himself is one of many Archons that serve the will of their all-powerful leader known as Kairos, who has the ability to quite literally split the earth in half, cause massive storms, or spread famine across the land. Meaning Kairos has been able to conquer almost all regions known as tiers of the continent you find yourself in. When the game begins, Kairos is on a crusade to conquer the last remaining and fighting tier, which will solidify them as the all-powerful and unstoppable leader of the known world. So as a Fatebinder, you are tasked with entering this final tier and upholding Kairos' law, along with announcing any edicts that Kairos may pass, the power that allows the world to crumble beneath their feet. It's not only an awesome setup because you get to play as the bad guys in an apocalyptic Bronze Age full of interesting world building, but also because of how philosophical the narrative really is. You see, Kairos isn't like most bad guys. He, she, or whatever they are, something we've never fully get to know, is an enigma to almost everyone on the continent. How this great leader's powers came to be, and what the ultimate end goal even is, are still unknown. And even more fascinating, Kairos is not just an evil dictator. We discover that in many of the already conquered tiers, life for the lower classes has been in many ways improved. Family has become a focus, and by many accounts, civilization prospered. But in those same accounts, we learn that Kairos rules with an iron fist, and does not allow anything in the Empire besides obeying every command. A better life at the cost of all of your freedom. But we aren't here to discuss free will versus convenience, despite that being another very fascinating topic, especially in the modern era with big tech companies. Because the real most interesting philosophical lesson of Tyranny is its analysis of power and where it stems from. You see, for most people across the continent, Kairos is essentially a god. Wherever they go, their will is imposed easily, and because of the destruction everyone has seen in the other tiers, many people think there is no hope. It alludes to many of the arguments made by Thomas Hobbes in his famous work Leviathan. Hobbes argued that the power of authority derives from the consent of the governed, and that fear is the best indicator of true power. As much as it seems like Kairos' power is a result of their ability to wield great and unknown magics, the true power of Kairos is the fear they inspire in their subjects. For example, while we as a Fatebinder in-game do early on receive our first edict, an order from Kairos that when read aloud tears the region asunder, even before this point everyone fears the sight of us, not because of what we have done, but because what we are capable of doing. In a strange way, the fear of our power is even more potent than the power itself. Or in other words, Kairos' strength derives not just from their mastery of godlike powers, but also their mastery and manipulation of the mind. What makes Kairos a god to the people isn't the fact that they can create tornadoes that reach for the heavens or earthquakes that topple every building. It's the fact that within the minds of the people, they fear this leader and will do anything to protect themselves. Hobbes thought that leaders like Kairos were the most effective because human beings have a natural desire for security. We are self-interested and seek refuge from the chaos of the natural world. And because of these instincts, we tend to fall into religious systems or under the rule of gods that provide a sense of order and control, that promise to guard us from our fears. So for most people in the tiers of tyranny, they give up before they even put up a fight, because of the fear in their hearts of what would happen otherwise. But not everyone gives up, and even from what we see early on in the story, many people are willing to fight to the death for their old ways of life. So the question then becomes, how do you fight a god? Well, you become one. Later on in the main story of Tyranny, you are given multiple choices to either stay aligned with Kairos or break from your shackles of evil to help those in need. But no matter which route you choose, by far the most fascinating moments come towards the end. After traversing the old walls, ancient underground caverns and structures built by hyper-advanced civilization, you eventually discover that the spires dotted all around the lands across the continent are nothing more than tall buildings that reach into the sky. At the top of each are conductors of magic that once unlocked give you too the same powers as Kairos, the ability to cast edicts. This all-powerful god, an enigma of which we know so little about that just moments before seemed utterly unstoppable, now is nothing but your equal. Now with the ability to tear the world apart in the same way, you cast an edict in order to show the people that Kairos is not unbeatable. And when you do, it inspires in the hearts of millions hope. Hope that they no longer have to fear, but instead can take back what they believe in. For so long, the people of the continent have lived in constant fear and oppression and put faith in the only thing they could. But now, with an alternative option and more people discovering the truth of this ancient magic, the walls begin to come down. Even though Kairos still has the ability to cast these great magics, this ability no longer matters. Because Kairos' power never came from the magic. It came from, as Hobbes argued, the ability to inspire fear or to induce faith in those around you. And when Kairos is stripped of this contagion of the mind, that is when the people finally start to stand up. Power, or the idea of becoming a god, isn't like most people think. Gods and dictators don't garner their power or induce their will with magic scrolls or imposing strength. They get it from the will of their people. Without a belief in what they are saying, nothing they say has any power at all. Even the will of Kairos does not spawn from thin air. It comes from the reading of an edict, which must be heard and believed by the people and read aloud from a fate binder. Or in other words, it comes from the faith that their fear is justified. Power doesn't come from omnipotence, from the afterlife, or from creating the universe as we know it. Power comes from faith, from belief in an idea of power itself. So if you want to rule a people, if you want to become a god, then all you have to do is simply convince the people that you are one. Whether or not you have the powers or capabilities is irrelevant, because the power of faith trumps all. And no game that I can think of teaches this lesson better than the story of Tyranny and the rise and potential fall of Kairos. Because while this game will likely never get the sequel it deserves, where we could take on Kairos firsthand with our new army of faithful, at least the first title was able to get this main message across so clearly and in such a beautiful way.